Hello everyone, and welcome to Startup Magazine's latest webinars of the series that we've been doing. This one is breaking into health tech. I'm Anna Flockett, the editor of the magazine and your host today, and we're so pleased that you could all join us. A lot of us, obviously, most of us are still working from home, so we've created these webinars to try and bring everyone together and help us stay connected in these weird times and for us to learn a little bit about something. So today we have an amazing group of people talking with us all about the health tech sector and how the last few months has really affected the landscape for startups and how things have genuinely changed within the industry, and talking about how you can kind of break into the health tech sector, which actually fits nice with our latest podcast series, which if you haven't listened to, I would really recommend. You can download and listen to it now, and it actually features a number of health tech startups and startups in other industries that have had to pivot and change in this time. And two of the people on our panel today were actually featured on the podcast, so you should definitely check that series out. To start us off with, today we will be having the wonderful Gabby from OpenMind Wellbeing to help us calm down, ready for the next hour with a 5-minute mindfulness session. And then we'll pass the baton over to Edward Elliott, who is Head of Growth at Public, Europe's leading GovTech venture firm. And Edward has supported over 12 health tech startups to scale, and today he'll be looking into what it takes to break into the health tech sector in the UK. Then finally, we have 3 incredible startups in the health tech space. I was speaking to James Flint, CEO and founder of Hospify, Joanna Montgomery, founder of Riot, and Sherezade Ruano, founder of RhythmiaBreath. All about what their startups do, what challenges they face, and any advice that they have for any other startups out there. So we will have time for questions at the end, but if any pop into your head at any time, we have got the Q&A function and the chat function at the bottom. So pop on there at any time. And now I will stop rambling on and let me introduce you to Gabby.
Hi there, thanks Anna. You're not rambling on. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. As Anna said, I'll be doing a short 5-minute little mindfulness meditation just to kind of get everybody synced up a little bit and ready for this. And I was thinking about what to do today, and given that it is health tech startup in flux, I thought it'd be really nice actually to kind of admit that people in this sector might feel pressure that we're meant to be doing amazing because this is an opportunity, but actually it's still change and uncertainty, and kind of the theme of the mindfulness. So as and when you're ready, just find a nice tall comfortable seat, nice long spine, if you can, feet on the floor, hands can be resting on your thighs. And then as and when you're ready, just allowing the eyes to draw closed if that's comfortable for you. If not, just pick a gazing point somewhere in front of you, on the desk, on the wall, and just rest that gaze softly. Otherwise, draw the eyes closed. Allow the awareness to turn inwards. Let's take a few nice deep breaths together. Big inhales, filling up the lungs to the sides, the front, the back, all the way to the bottom. Exhale, maybe even open the mouth, sigh it out. And take a couple of those. Nice deep inhale in through the nose. Exhale, breathing out through the mouth, release, really start to let everything settle, relax. And just one more breath like that together. Deep inhale. Exhale, sighing it out, let the shoulders relax, the torso, the hips, right down through the legs to the feet. And I'm going to invite you to just take a moment here and think of one thing that you want to invite in or you want to move towards. So it could be something just for today. It could be just being open-minded about the next hour. It could be very specific to the next hour, connecting with people, community. Or it could be larger, something that you've been wanting to do and is on your mind, and you just want to focus on it for a moment. And I'm also going to invite you to think of one thing that you want to let go of. So again, it could be really specific. Could be putting your to-do list aside for the hour. If you have kids in the background, maybe tuning them out for the hour. Or it could be a lot bigger. Maybe there's fear or other things at play at the moment. And just with those two things in mind, we're going to let one go and move towards the other. I'm going to use the breath to do that. So I'm going to simply focus on the inhale, on drawing in and moving towards, filling up with what you're chosen to move towards. And on the exhales, start to release and let go. Imagine you're physically letting go of whatever you want to move away from. Inhaling, you're filling up, drawing in, moving towards. And as you exhale, releasing a little bit more each time. Inhale, drawing it in. Exhale, release, let go. A few more here. Inhale as you draw it in. Feel yourself really fill up with whatever it is you're inviting in, all the way down to saturating your cells with it. And as you exhale, releasing any last little remnants of anything you want to put aside, let go. Let's take one more nice deep breath together. Exhale, releasing one last time. And let's take one last nice deep cleansing breath together, in through the nose. Open the mouth, exhale, sigh it out. And then as and when you're ready, just allowing the eyes to open up nice and slowly. And just get ready for the hour ahead and Edward's amazing keynote to start. So I'll hand it back to Anna. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabby. That was incredible. As usual, I really look forward to your mindfulness sessions now. But that's got us off to a good start. So let me now introduce you all to Edward.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Please do say if I'm stuck on mute. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. So hopefully you'll be able to see a slideshow in a second. Brilliant. Hopefully everyone can see that. Great. Well, firstly, thank you so much to Startup Magazine for inviting me to come speak. I'm really looking forward to hearing the panel session, which will come next. I'm just going to speak a little bit as to kind of breaking into the public health market. Obviously something which is particularly relevant right now, just because of the crisis we're all going through. But I'm sure for many of the startups that are joining, this has been something that you've been thinking about for months, if not years. And hopefully throughout the next 20 minutes, I can just give a few extra tips of what we found public to be successful for some of the health tech startups that we've worked with. Before I kick off, I thought I'd just give a few quick sentences on public and what we do, just to set context. In one line, public helps tech startups work with the public sector, and the classic problem we're trying to solve is that if you are a small company, particularly a tech company, looking to work with government, it can be very, very hard. It can be hard to know who to talk to, let alone how to get in front of them. Once you have got in front of them, to know, what are the particular problems they want solving, what are the policy issues that they're worrying about on a day-to-day basis. And then going from there, if you do find someone who wants to buy your product or your service, it can still take 3, 6, 12 months to get your product, bought and get money coming through the door, which for many small companies is just far too long to even think about. And that, for a long reason, is why the kind of innovation we've seen in the private sector, as of yet, hasn't really taken hold in the public sector, but that is changing quite rapidly. What tangibly do we do? Well, it's a mixture of accelerators. GovStart on the far left is our most well-known one, but we also do white-labeled accelerators with government. we recently launched an acceleration program with NHSX that ran a program looking for technology to help with care for the elderly, remote care for the elderly during the coronavirus crisis. And we've done a few other programs as well. We do research work, which is Public Insights, the second from the left. We run events such as the GovTech Summit, which is our largest one. And then we also have a co-working space in Whitehall next to the Ministry of Defence, where I think there's about 240 desks for startups, which also provides a bit of a hub to meet people in government and create a kind of natural ecosystem where startups and government can interact. So that's a little bit about public. To kind of plow into the subjects I'm going to try and talk through today, I'm going to try and talk about breaking into public health. There are a couple of assumptions I'm going to make. This is obviously a huge topic, and I've just tried to narrow it down a little bit. I'm going to assume you're a startup. I'm going to assume you're a tech startup in particular, and that you either have a product or you're getting pretty close to finishing a product, and now you're looking more at scaling or finding those first few pilots and trials. I'm going to assume that you are particularly interested in the sort of public health market or public health organizations, as I put in the kind of box to the right. There are other people you can be selling to, other markets you can be going into, and they are worth considering. You know, lots of great companies, health tech companies in the UK have made considerable money working with pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, you know, B2C. Working with the NHS or other sort of government bodies is not the only route. It just happens to be the route which I know the most about. So it will be the one that I'll focus on here, but do not discount the others. I'm also going to work under the view that you do already know a fair bit about health in the UK. If I say the words NHS, you'll know what that means, as well as CCG and trusts and so on. If these are all kind of new terms to you, there are loads of great guides throughout the internet that will give you an introduction. And I'd really recommend just sort of skilling up on a basic knowledge of the kind of health landscape here in the UK. Just a word of warning, I'm not an expert in biotechnology. If you are looking to produce sort of chemicals or drugs that would be applied in health context, there is a slightly different set of advice, of which I'm probably not best placed to advise on, but please do stick around because I think some of the advice here will hopefully still be useful. Health in the UK, public health in the UK is a very complex landscape, and I've tried to keep things fairly general because, as you can see on the left-hand side, there are lots of different types of health tech products that can then dock into or sell to lots of different parts of the UK health system. And that creates a very complex landscape. To get more granular, it would have to be much more one-to-one advice, but I've tried to pick out a few things that I think will be more generally useful. But it's worth bearing in mind as well, you know, what is the state of play here for health tech in the UK and for health services in the UK? Well, now more than ever, government wants solutions to their problems, and they want them quickly and they want them easily. Startups have shown themselves across lots of different industries that they are best placed to provide innovative products that will almost always be cheaper, faster, easier than incumbents that are using legacy technology. And the central problem is government really hasn't sort of worked that out yet. And you can look at sort of buying statistics across a range of different public sector areas, not just health. And the spend on SMEs, not even startups, is often below 8% of the total IT spend in those departments, which is shockingly low in many ways, and is very, very different to lots of private sector businesses. So that's the kind of state of play you guys are working against at this moment in time. And the reason for that is that, to put you in the shoes of a public sector buyer, there are a number of barriers that they face when trying to work with health tech startups. And I'll just quickly walk through each of them. I've sort of classified 4 here, but there are more. just general culture and risk aversion, it is well known that the public sector places a very high standard on value for money, and that often sort of mutates into a general risk aversion for anything that is less tried and tested. Startups tend to fall into that category, not always, but it is definitely true that for most public sector buyers, they will not understand or will be less certain around working with small technology companies using new technology. They will probably see AI as something that is from the Terminator and not a real kind of technology application. So there will be a number of barriers in terms of just general familiarity with what you will be working with when you stand in front of a public sector buyer in the health space. Health sector buyers generally do find it quite hard to find good solutions. And when they have found good solutions, it's often very difficult for them to work out the difference between a really good startup and a startup that is maybe has not got the most robust technology or not got great funding. These are not skill sets that your average public sector buyer will have been trained in or will be used to. And finally, and arguably the largest barrier will be that procurement in the public sector, as I've already said, takes a very long time. And that is not just a long time for you as the startup, as the supplier, but also a long time for the buyer. And if you are, say, a commercial director or a commercial manager in a trust or a CCG or any other sort of health organization within the public sector, you will be adding 2 or 3 extra sort of weeks of work on your plate by taking on an additional procurement, often an irregular procurement that some new technology does present. So it is worth sort of being aware that the sort of time demands that you will be placing into this sort of procurement process will also be mirrored by the people who are buying your technology on the other side. Just a point to say, obviously these things fall on a general progression from pre-procurement right through to sale, and they're kind of almost tackled sequentially as you go through. Cool. So having said that, what are the 5 tips I would give you when approaching the public sector? I think the first to say is credentialize yourself. This is a very broad one, but pretty much the only way you can tackle a kind of risk aversion within sort of public sector buyers is to give them the confidence that you have done this before, or you have the relative evidence to show that your solution will save them time, save them money, and will be able to operate in often a very high pressured and a market where you can't tolerate mistakes from your technology. How do you credentialize yourself? Well, obviously case studies and evidence is the best thing. If you can point to having worked with a similar health body where you have proved and sort of saved them time and money, those are great things to be able to point to. But it is also the case that you could point to a whole range of other things. Having advisors on your board who are former medical directors in hospitals or trusts or central NHS organizations is a great thing to be able to point to. Being able to point to a series of sort of data protection and cybersecurity standards will not only help with procurement, but will put a lot of buyers at ease to show that you have done the work to get your product in the right place where it won't fall over when it hits a clinical environment. Similarly, frameworks just shows that you've done the right level of studying up on where you need to be commercially to work with them, that you're someone who can be trusted within a framework environment. And then finally, maybe not the case for all startups, but joining an accelerator that comes with a label, a brand of credibility, will also transfer onto yourself and can help you sort of not only gain networks to approach buyers, but also do so where they have a degree of trust in those accelerators and the products that they have backed. Cast the network wide. So there's a bit of context you need to be aware of here, which is that public sector buyers, particularly in health, will be thinking about the problem that you are trying to solve for a very small and particular part of their sort of general working life. And it will normally be either when a contract is coming up for renewal, or it will be when they are coming to the end of their budgetary cycle. And it will be a window that will be open to you for the best part of probably 1 to 2 months every other year, or possibly every year, depending on the particular product or tool in question. Now, it is difficult for even large companies to find out when those time periods will open, when those windows of opportunity open, purely from looking at sort of tender databases. It will be even harder for you as a small company to spend the time and the research to find out when all of these windows will be open. So my advice would be, get to know a lot of the people who will be buyers during these windows early. You know, ingratiate yourselves, get to know them as friends, tell them what your product can do, and have them come to you when their window of opportunity opens is the easiest way to do this. That means that even if you don't necessarily have a working product at this point in time, or you are still at a kind of quite early stage of scaling where you can only work with, say, 3 or 4 healthcare bodies at this point in time, it is still worth going out, meeting the wider list of buyers that you will need to meet, because ultimately, you know, a year down the line, you want them to already know who you are before you go into procurement process. A, because it will make your life a lot easier, but B, there is the chance that they will want to contact you before they even go into procurement, to kind of better understand what you do. And then in the ideal situation, they will frame their procurement to be suited to the kind of products that you will be able to deliver. But you can only do that if you're casting the network or the net wide to begin with. Number 3, and this is often the one that is, I found working with startups, the hardest to get right. Be a policy entrepreneur. What does that mean? Well, in the most basic terms, and this should be sort of 101 of sales as the public sector in general, you need to talk about the solution that you're supplying and not the technology that's ultimately doing the solving. No public sector buyer wants to know that you are using AI or blockchain or IoT or whatever device that whatever particular technology you are using. What they really want to know is, can you solve their problem, and can you do it fast, easily, in a way that will save them money? But being a policy entrepreneur is almost like going a level above that, and it's presenting your technology in a mission-like statement that will appeal not only to the buyer, but to the people who will sit above that buyer as policymakers, transformation directors, ministers, secretaries of states, for them to be able to latch onto and shape the market in which you work. These people who sit above buyers are hugely influential and will be pretty much pivotal to large scaling further down the line. And the only way to appeal to them is to not try and sell them a product, but sell them a sort of policy of which your product is a part of. So let me put this in very tangible terms. There is a company that we work with as part of Public called Patchwork, which is an app that matches doctors to vacant locum shifts in hospitals. Very, very effective, but very basic product in some terms. If Patchwork were pitching to an investor, they might sort of present themselves as, we are a SaaS marketplace product that matches supply and demand for clinical staff and medical workers. To an investor, that will make complete sense. To a health buyer, that will make no sense. When they pitch themselves to a health buyer, it's much more likely to be, we can save you time and money by avoiding agency fees and matching vacant shifts with doctors directly. It's presenting the solution first and the technology second. However, if they then wanted to take that a level above and say, you know, what is the kind of policy entrepreneur approach? Locum Tap, or Patchwork, I should say, their kind of narrative is much more, the NHS has a chronic problem of staffing, and staff are leaving the NHS in droves. One of the principal reasons for this is they don't have enough control and flexibility over their own working hours. We can provide, or we believe the future of the NHS will be one where individual workers have greater control and flexibility over what they do, and we are designing a product, which is Patchwork, to help them do that. So it's presenting a vision of where the NHS is heading and then how your particular product fits within that. And that is the narrative that they then ultimately drive through, engagement with senior stakeholders, but also PR opportunities, op-ed opportunities, things where you need to be able to point to a larger mission rather than just the particular product that you're trying to sell. And as I say, this is really, really important for engaging with people above the buyer level who will ultimately, from a top-down point of view, affect the environment in which you're trying to sell. Cool. Number 4. In some ways, I probably should have opened with this one. This is arguably the most important, but sadly the most mundane. So I thought I would sort of leave it a little bit later. Even if you are trying to sell to public health, there are sort of 3 or 4 different routes to market. You could be selling directly to trusts and CCGs, which is kind of the B2G route, and I'll come back to this. However, you could also look to sell through third parties like system integrators and primes. The route to market there will be quicker, but obviously comes with a degree of greater instability as you're working through a third party. In addition to that, there are many companies over the last 5 years that have pioneered a kind of B2C to B approach, which is selling kind of B2C to individual clinicians or doctors, and then using that sort of, I guess, basis of support from individuals to then leverage into selling to trusts. It's a slightly longer term approach and tends to work best with sort of productivity tools, but not one that should necessarily be discounted. You should try and work out pretty early on which of these routes to market you think will be most effective for you, because it will greatly affect your strategy and your scaling over time. Just to quickly concentrate on the direct sale to government. This is an area which is often hard to understand and very few startups understand well. Just to understand the basics of procurement, if you are looking to sell to public bodies, there are sort of 3 different levels that you should be aware of. If you're selling a product that is less than £10,000 per sale, you can avoid most procurement mechanisms and you can get sales done very, very quickly within weeks in some cases. If you're looking to sell a product that is somewhere between, 50K to 150K, you will have to go through a shortened procurement process that will probably take you around in a month and a half to 2 months, but will ultimately still be a lot quicker than a full procurement process, which can take anywhere between 3 to 6 months and has to be gone through by every public body for contracts either above 100K or 150K, depending on the particular public body in question. Now, the moment you get into those larger procurement processes, it will require a much more rigorous procurement and buying process, which many startups are not positioned to pursue. And I really would not recommend doing it for any company that is sort of younger than Series B. It will take up a lot of your time for single contracts where you will be often at a large disadvantage in comparison to large legacy suppliers, purely due to the nature of the questions they will be asking you about balance sheet, insurance, and so on and so on. So it is worth thinking about, how do you price your product? What is going to be your method or your route to scale to fit around these sort of public procurement boundaries? And therefore, what do you need to be thinking about not only for growth in this year, but also the subsequent years of growth that will come as your product develops? A large way in which you'll be able to sell into public bodies will be frameworks and will be DPSs. Get to know what G-Cloud is, get to know what Digital Outcomes and Specialists is, or Spark, find which framework is most relevant for you. And also keep track of particular public sector and health frameworks. There are quite a lot in the health space. Sorry, I'm being attacked by a bee as I talk. Look for particularly specialist health frameworks that will be relevant to you. A lot of public bodies, particularly in the social care space, will have very small niche frameworks that they will like to buy off. Get to know what they are. It will be a much, much faster route to sale over the longer period of time. Cool. And I'll just come around to the last one here. And I think this is advice as much for you, but also for the investors that you work with. do not expect things to come quickly and expect them to come easily. If you're working with the public sector, even once you've made your sale, there is then a huge challenge, which is implementing that technology into clinical environments such that it will stick. You know, doctors and nurses are very intelligent individuals, but often ones that are used to particular ways of working, and it will often take them a while to adopt new approaches. Develop a method, a robust method for implementing your technology, whether it's primary care, secondary care, central health. Make sure you know how to do that really robustly, because ultimately, you know, you can't expect them just to pick up your product and develop it overnight. Similarly, I think the same expectation has to set for you and your investors. You will not just in health, but in all public sector markets, be able to accelerate at the pace of growth that you will in a traditional B2B or B2C market. The sales cycles are much slower. Buyers are much more risk averse. You need to be aware yourself, but also let your investors know that the traditional trajectories of growth that they will be expecting may be slower in your case, because ultimately you do not want an investor sort of banging down your door telling you you're not going fast enough when actually you're going at a very good rate of growth, because it will create a lot of hassles for you later down the line. Great. So, I mean, that's pretty much it for me. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ping them to me. I've put my details up on screen there. Very happy to answer any questions. I'll also sort of share the slide deck if helpful. And I think if we've got time, there might be some time for some questions as well. I'll sort of quickly stop sharing my screen and hopefully reappear.
Thank you so much. That was really great. Really insightful, and I love the slideshow.
Oh, thanks. Cheers.
So yeah, it was really good. We haven't actually got any questions at the moment. Obviously, it was very clear, concise advice. So it was really useful. But obviously there might be some questions pop along. So if there's any at the end, then obviously we'll give you a shout. And as I say, your details are on there, and your slides will be on the post-event mailer tomorrow. Perfect. And
yeah, sounds great.
It was also great that you mentioned Patchwork Health, because they're one of the guys that we featured on the first series of the podcast as well. So if people want to learn more about them, then,
brilliant.
Yeah, Dr. Anna was great. Really, really great to talk to. Perfect.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, Anas is great. And if you're looking for a model of a founder who knows the health tech industry inside out, he's a great person to look at.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that example. And again, thank you, Edward. It was really great. Well, let me please now introduce our panel back to our screen. So Sheree, James and Joanna, please come back and join me. Hello.
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 I just wait. Zoom takes a little while to unmute people. So yeah. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Good. Good. So I thought maybe for the audience to start with, if we go around each one of you, and if you could just tell us a little bit about your startup and when you founded them. So Sheree, should we start with you?
Sure, why not? So I'm Sherry. I'm the CEO and founder of RhythmiaBreath and Rhythmia Hub Digital Therapeutics. I still work as an arrhythmia specialist nurse in the NHS. So I combine my position as a CEO with my work in the NHS. I founded RhythmiaBreath in 2014, but it wasn't until end of 2018 when we started to explode, and that happened when I found my co-founder. And yeah, since a few months ago, we've gone really quickly. We've grown really fast, and the futures are exciting for us.
Oh, amazing. Amazing to hear that. James, can we ping over to you next?
Hello. Hi, thanks very much. Yes, delighted to be here. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Edward. I feel like I've learned all of that the hard way. I kind of wish I'd been able to see that presentation 5 years ago. It might have saved me a lot of pain and blood, sweat and tears, or at least showed me what I was in for when we started Hospify. We started back in 2013, 2014 now, quite a long time ago, although it wasn't really till 2015 when we got on an accelerator program with Montgomery Ventures that we sort of pivoted to messaging. Before then, we were trying to do something slightly more kind of social media-y. And we decided on messaging, and it's been a long, slow haul since then, kind of collecting all of those bits and pieces, ISO 27001, G-Cloud framework, getting on the, well, not the Digital Health London, but the Kent Surrey Sussex Digital Health Accelerator, which is affiliated to Digital Health London, building up our network, and working out our pricing so that we fall below this, those big procurement cutoff levels. I mean, all of that stuff is all stuff that we've had to do and learn and adapt to, and also find the kind of investors who want to take the long-term view. I mean, we're a healthcare messaging company. Sort of WhatsApp for healthcare is the sort of the strap line, we are all about that B2C2B model, trying to get a free app in the hands of clinicians and also patients, so that sort of spreads the word, and then to try and convert that into the decision makers in a trust or in a surgery who suddenly think, oh, actually this can save us money and lower our risk around data protection and that kind of thing. So we are, after kind of spending several years getting that into place and getting a product that was able to support it, a product that actually worked, we've suddenly seen an explosion because of COVID-19, like a lot of other digital health apps. And we've seen, a lot of brand awareness as well, which is really exciting. We featured in the FT alongside Patchwork recently, which was great. And I think that, we got on the NHS apps library just before the COVID crisis started, just before lockdown, which was also fantastic because that was a massive stamp of approval. Very difficult to do. That took us a year just to get that. And I think that now finally we're kind of getting that steam. We've made our first sales over the last couple of months into the NHS, which we'd not managed to do before. I think that's, indicative of just how much COVID has changed the temperature. Nothing really from us has changed, but I think the NHS has changed a lot in the last 2 months, and suddenly a lot of experimentation, a lot of people have been empowered to make decisions around digital health tools that has been difficult for them to make before. There's been a lot of institutional inertia. So it's kind of an exciting time. All our problems aren't solved. We're still, battling every day to build the business. But I feel that the NHS and digital health has turned a corner this year much more rapidly than expected to do. And there's an opportunity for really a lot more efficiencies around the way that health is delivered to come out of the digital startup ecosystem. And I think that there's a lot of people prepared to listen on the institutional side who found it difficult to listen before, or to think that it could really apply to them. So it's a really exciting time.
Yes, definitely, and we will get onto that. But Joanna, finally, would you like to, last but not least, would you like to introduce your little Riot to us?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Joanna, and I run a startup called Little Riot, and we basically try to make technology more human. So we actually launched in 2010, was when we started with our R&D process, and we sell a product, a consumer product, which is called Pillow Talk. And the way it works is it's a wristband, a soft wristband people wear to bed, and a little speaker that most people put under their pillow when they go to bed at night. And the wristband picks up your heartbeat, and it sends the real-time sound and the feeling of your heartbeat to the device which the other person has. So we shipped a consumer product in 2017, which is now in 55 countries. And then a couple of years ago, we got approached by a children's hospital in the Netherlands who asked if they could run a pilot to connect parents with their kids who were too sick to be taken out of bed. So we ran that pilot, and it went 10 times better than we ever thought it would go. We thought we would just be connecting parents with their kids, but what we discovered was actually the kids that could hear their parents' heartbeats were calmer, more rested, their breathing rate was lower. So they think that long term, being connected to their parents in that way might actually have some impact on their well-being. So we've sort of accidentally strayed into the healthcare world and are learning rapidly as we go.
Perfect. And it's really nice that you're all kind of like in the health tech sector, but all kind of a bit different. Obviously, Joanna, you've got like a wearable product. So my question to all of you, Joanna, maybe we could start with you, would be what kind of challenges have you faced along the way so far in your journey?
I've had an incredibly long journey. It took me a very long time from when my product actually started as my university project and went viral on the internet many years ago. So when I started, it was before startups were a thing. It was way before wearables were a thing. It was a very uphill battle. On the healthcare front, I think we've actually been quite lucky because we always sort of had a loose plan to eventually end up in healthcare, but I'd heard all these horror stories about how complicated it's been. And we just got so lucky with that first hospital and that first pilot, and that they did a lot of the legwork in terms of jumping through all the hoops and passing all the red tape, and that really opened a lot of doors for us in ways which I don't think we would ever have managed to do if we just tried to foray on into healthcare off our own back.
Amazing. And James, what kind of challenges have you faced along the way? I know there might be many.
Yeah, I think that, well, I touched on a few of them in my intro, which sort of rambled off in that direction slightly, but I think that again, Edward identified a lot of the potential challenges, and I think we hit most of them. I mean, I'm not somebody with a healthcare background. I mean, I did a experimental psychology degree many moons ago, but I was a tech journalist. I didn't really have any experience in healthcare other than being in hospital a couple of times. So my co-founder, of course, was a doctor, but as a surgeon, had a particular view on the industry, and I think we learned the hard way just how many barriers to entry there are. But I think what we did realize is we did know it was going to be a long haul. We always assumed it was going to be difficult, that there were going to be lots of hurdles, and that's partly why we did it. It's partly why we chose to build the company, was because we felt that actually those hurdles, one, mean that you're, apart from the fact that doing a startup in health is a good thing to do, there are rewards beyond the success of the business and the financial success of the business. You just feel like you're doing something worthwhile, and it's good. It helps you get out in bed in the morning, even if your startup is growing more slowly than it might have done in the commercial sector. But also, if you overcome those hurdles make it difficult for other people too. If you're the people that can last the course, if you have a strategy that means you can hunker down and patiently climb up, those mountains and find yourself in the valleys on the other side of them, and you know that other people are not going to be able to do that, and actually it's a barrier to entry. So, when you do kind of climb those mountains, you find that on the other side, actually, there's a bit less competition than there was before you climb them. So, and that's quite good. And that means that that's encouraging to investors, because then, you have a reason to say, well, actually, what makes us unique is the fact that we've done all these things, and so you can turn, I think, some of these problems and hurdles into benefits. But you do need a long haul strategy. And I think that the challenge for us has been, building a product in a really competitive space, when you're competing with, in a space where people are used to tools like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, which are built by billion-dollar companies and have thousands and thousands of employees, and are obviously very slick and incredibly, reliable. Coming in, as a tiny team, basically building the product ourselves on almost no money, trying to get it so reliable so that when people get it, it feels as good to them as using WhatsApp does. And that is really, really, really hard. And our biggest challenge has been trying to do that on an absolute shoestring with a tiny team, and unable to raise, big investment. Because investors don't want us worried by health, so you tend to pick off smaller investors who are a bit more prepared to take the risk, or who know the sector, and that's a huge challenge, and we still have that challenge every day, although we are sort of getting there now, but it's taken a long time and a lot of resource, personal resource and intellectual resource, to do that.
Of course, but it is worth it in the end.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I am more. I've done many jobs in my career, and I'm, a few of them have paid as badly as working for Hospify does. One hopes that in the long run we will make some money, but it is also the most meaningful job I've ever done.
Oh, good to hear. That is great to hear. And Sheree, obviously you kind of work in the NHS, you studied it and now you work in it, and then you created your own startup in it. What kind of challenges have you faced along the way, and how hard do you think it is to kind of break through into that health tech sector?
Right, so I didn't mention this in the introduction, but RhythmiaBreath, we merge modern medicine with holistic practices for the prevention and rehabilitation of heart disease and mental well-being. So despite the fact that my idea was very well received by the consultant cardiologist I used to work with when I was doing my research study, one of the first and main challenges that I've faced in the medical community, and I'm talking as someone that is already there in the system and has the credibility and the background, it has been the acceptance in the medical community that holistic practices can be implemented in the mainstream medicine. So, and there's still a lot of resistance towards that thought. And I'm talking about 8 years ago, so things have changed, drastically and massively. And now everywhere you go in a hospital, everyone knows what it is, doing mindfulness to slow down your heart rate, to slow down your respiratory rate, and kind of everyone understand the benefits of these practices for patients. But it was very different when I first started talking about it 8 years ago, especially with cardiologists, with all the respect in the world, but I know them very well. The challenge number 2 probably is I'm not a techie. So being in the tech case as a founder with no experience whatsoever in the tech industry was really challenging. However, I think I focused a lot in what skills I was missing, and I tried to network a lot, and I tried to be surrounded by people that could, teach me all the skills. And finally, as I said at the beginning, when I found my team, I made sure that they were the best ones I could find in the tech scene. And so this is when my co-founder and our CDO, Amrit and Nina, came in the picture. And without them, I would have never been able to do, what I'm doing at the moment. And one of the current challenges that we're facing as a company, as a business at the moment is around data protection, cybersecurity, and GDPR. Especially, we're preparing ourselves to face Brexit. And we are expanding internationally, worldwide, pretty soon. So it's going to be quite challenging times for startups in the health tech sector. So this is our current challenge, but we will face it. We will go through it.
And do you think it's harder for startups that have an idea and want to start a business in health tech than it kind of is in any other sector?
The challenges are, I wouldn't say it's more difficult. The challenges are different.
Okay. Yeah.
When we talk about patients' health and disease and conditions and patients' confidentiality, everything changes drastically because there's so many stones in your way. And so, yeah, it's not more difficult, but that is just a different challenge that you need to know how to navigate them safely, and making sure that what you're doing proves efficacy and security both for patients and big organizations. Without that, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, definitely. And Joanna, I mean, obviously you said you kind of fell into the health tech sector. It wasn't necessarily planned. Do you think it's been more difficult breaking into the health sector than it might have been in other areas, or do you have any other do you know any other founders that aren't in the health sector that you might have faced more challenges than they necessarily have?
I mean, so we built a hardware product which felt like the biggest challenge there could ever be. Like I said, we got quite lucky with our first into the healthcare, and off the back of that pilot, we then had a bunch of other hospitals, particularly in the US, who also wanted to try it or speak to us. So we were lucky with that. But what has surprised me sometimes is whenever we try and speak to somebody who hasn't come to us, it can be like banging your head off a brick wall, which makes me realize how difficult it must be if you have an idea or you're trying to build a healthcare business and you don't have someone that wants to partner you or you don't have an easy in. I just dread to think what it must be like trying to go in cold.
Definitely. And have you seen any major changes to the industry over the last 3 months since the whole COVID-19 has broken out?
For us, it's been a strange one because our consumer product is more in demand than ever, because suddenly millions of people are unable to physically be in the same place as their loved ones. We've seen a huge increase in inquiries from hospitals because they quite literally have people dying alone because their friends and family can't get in, and they want our product so that they get both the patients in hospital but also the family can have some comfort in being able to do something. So it's sort of been a funny one for us because we have had a lot of new inquiries, but at the same time a lot of the conversations for pilots that we were having have now been put on the back burner while they deal with the current crisis.
Oh, well, it's nice obviously that there's something there that can kind of help in this time. And I know, James, obviously the current situation, it's kind of been massively changing for you guys as well, and you've kind of seen a massive influx in business. Do you think, obviously, from Hospify's point of view, it's massively changed, but do you think also that the health sector has seen a massive change? I know you mentioned this briefly earlier.
Yeah, definitely. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, put it quite well that there's been 2 years of digital transformation in health, and in about 2 weeks, mainly in March. I think every health professional I've spoken to in the last couple of months has said much the same thing. Another quote from a doctor we're in touch with said, we've fallen through the trap door and we're not going to climb back through it. I think that people have seen that digital tools can be very easy to roll out. They can be very effective. There's a quality and reliability that just wasn't there 10 years ago. They're much more structured for health, and because of things like GDPR and actually a lot of them, the frameworks and the toolkits and so on that Edward talked about, there's a quality standard, and the things like the apps library and Orca reviews and so on. It means the quality standard, and there's some sort of badges that mean that it's possible to choose things without choosing them completely cold, which is fantastic. What we found is there was a huge flurry of interest, especially in March and into April. And then it sort of peaked as really much as the crisis peaked, as we started to get, flatten the curve, as the phrase is. Actually, the curve started to flatten on demand, and we found that what we'd been riding really was a wave of experimentation, and then actually people have started to think. A lot of that sort of fell away, and then what we found, we were left with a core of people who were thinking about the longer term. And so what we've tried to do is, we've shuffled through the last sort of month, is make sure that that interest is about what does this mean for the longer term? Because it's all very well to ship a load of product and give it away for free and whatever, but actually what you need is sustained business, and actually what the health sector needs is sustained solutions that actually solve efficiency, budgetary and HR communication problems long term. So I think that where we are now is that the digital health kind of curve is really mapping the COVID curve quite closely, in that we're now thinking, okay, well, we're going to live with this for a long time now. It's not like we're going back to how it was in December last year.
Yeah.
People are not going to go back, but going forward is not actually that simple either, because what we need to do is work out what works for us, and that's true of every surgery and every department and every hospital. So I think that it's a great moment. There is going to be business opportunity there. We are going to see the large scale treatment, triage, and just sort of handling and follow up of patients in a way, remotely, in a way that we've never seen before. And that's a global, I think that's going to be global. So just about the UK, obviously, it's about every country in the world. You know, it just simply, the benefits of having less people come to hospital car parks and less people sit in doctor surgeries are so huge for the service, and actually so huge for patients. And you know, there's no way we're going to go back to how it was before. However, there will be a happy medium, and the tools that are going to have to work. So, you know, I think that's what it's going to be. We're going to be into this now. There are going to be more projects rolled out. There are going to be more things that stick in the service, and the services are going to be built on digital health in the way they haven't been in the past. Yeah, so, you know, I think it's going to change, and it's going to change forever.
Definitely. And Sheree, before I come on to ask you all about your advice for other startups out there, what do you kind of think that this crisis, I know you guys at RhythmiaBreath have been doing some work, and it's kind of, you've adapted and changed in the crisis too, but what do you think it kind of means for the future of health tech, this corona crisis that's happened to us? What do you think that will do to the future of health tech? Oh, Sheree, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm doing this. Sorry. Because I work in the NHS, I'm already there. I think big companies and big providers such as the NHS will still have difficulties adapting to the technology. That's just my personal view, I think. However, somehow they're forced to do it, right? And they are already they're already implementing certain strategies, for example, telemedicine, or, you know, consultations with consultants or specialist nurses like myself over the phone. So I'm sure that they will be more open to accept this type of technologies. I really hope that there's a bigger acceptance in the general public to implement and accept that, you know, technology needs to be part of our daily life and our, you know, and yeah, so as James said, things are not going to, you know, go back to that normal. So also patients need to adapt, and hopefully there will also be platforms that teach patients how to adapt to technology. That's hugely important, and everyone is focused about the solution, but the education around the consumer, it's incredibly important, and a lot of people misses that tremendously, because ultimately it's not really big organizations, right? If the consumer is completely reluctant to accept the fact that, you know, they now have to do telemedicine, things, you know, are not really going to work. So I'm talking about, as you know, as a person that's already in the system. So this is my personal view.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to go around now and ask you all if you've got any advice for any other startups out there in the health tech sector trying to break through. If you could go back maybe in time, what would you have done differently as your advice? Joanna, should we start with you?
My number one piece of advice for anyone running business, or basically any situation in general, is just always to trust your gut instinct. And it was a lesson that I learned the hard way multiple times, because particularly when I started my business, people who I thought were smarter than me or knew more than me would tell me that I couldn't trust my gut instinct, and that was no way to run a business. And there's a couple of times I got railroaded into other things, and turns out like your gut instinct's there for a reason, and it's always right. So yeah, that's always my best piece of advice, is just to, if something seems off, it's off, and if you think you should jump at something, jump at it.
Definitely, couldn't agree more. Sheree, should we ask for your advice?
Well, my number one in the medtech or health tech sector is the validation of an idea. And I can't not repeat this enough. And the validation comes from both parts, healthcare professionals, but also from patients, as I already said. And I would advise anyone that wants to break into the health tech, talk to as many patients, depending on the solution that you're trying to solve. try to talk to as many people that are facing this challenge, are facing this program, and also talk to healthcare professionals that are helping in a different way to solve that problem. So the validation of your idea and making sure that your idea is effective, is crucial. And then do enough market research as well. Learn what your competitors are doing and what's your niche and what's your UPS. You can't have a huge competitor, but then maybe your UPS is very specific, it's very unique. And as Joanna said, if you think that that's important and that's sufficient for you to succeed, just go for it. Because also, as Joanna said, if I wouldn't have followed my gut instinct, I would have given up 4 years ago and I would have never been here.
Oh, I'm glad you did then. I'm glad you are. And finally, James, can you finish us off with some insight followed by?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that maybe there are two things that I'd say. I mean, I don't like giving advice because I'm so bad at taking it. But I think that there were two things. One thing that stood out for me from Edward's, in fact, I screen grabbed the slide, although I think he's going to share the slide so I can have a look at it later. But I think one of those key slides, and actually, very exact document that I'm working on today for our next funding round, was get clear in your head those different levels of narrative. It was so useful, that, and it's been so hard for me to wrap my head around, and it's taken me so long, and I wish I'd done it earlier. But that the usefulness to the sort of end user of the product, the impact for the institution, right, and in parallel to that, the investor story, but then the policy impact, right. You really need to have in your head the functional, impact of your product and the story around it at those distinct layers, and they're very, very different. And if you go in with the story for one layer into another layer, you're just wasting your time. I thought that was what Edward said around that was particularly insightful and useful, and it's been a really hard thing for me to learn as somebody coming in from the outside of the sector. And it's really, really, really true in health more than any other sector that I've ever been in. So that would be one piece of advice. And the other piece of advice is, and I say this one because, it's closer to our heart, our Hospify, but it's also something I continually find myself being asked to advise startups on, is put data privacy at the heart of your product design. Do not try and tag it on later. And so, get Cybersecurity Essentials or ISOs or whatever it is early on, but it's not necessarily about that. It's about making sure you understand data privacy and making sure that you build it into the product structure. All health products handle data, and health data is particularly sensitive. And it's not just that it will make your life easier in the long run to do it from the start, rather than think about it later, but also it's a great way into engaging with those frameworks that Edward was talking about. If you build up your processes business around data and you understand what you're doing around data, when you come to do the NHS information governance or the G-Cloud framework or the DPSs or whatever it happens to be, we're about to do the new OJEU tender for NHSX. When you come to do those frameworks, you'll have a lot of the familiarity with the language and a lot of the paraphernalia you need to start writing out the frameworks, even if you don't have all of it. And so it just is a great starting point. It's a starting point you could start off, even if it's just yourself in a room, maybe, or just you and a co-founder. And if you start it then, it just puts you in such much better shape later on when the challenges get bigger. So those are the two things I'd really say knuckle down on.
Perfect. Well, that was great advice from all of you. I thank you for the panel. That is the end of my questions. There are a few questions from the audience, that's safe to say. So let me see. So there is, that's quite 5 questions, so let's just go through them. Stefan Todiwala, sorry about the name pronunciation, asked, will you have to adjust your pricing models while selling to the public sector, especially during this pandemic? I guess that's more of an Edward one, but if anybody wants to jump in and answer, then please do. We might have lost Edward for now.
Oh, sorry, I'm here. I was just coming off mute. I'll put my camera on as well. Sorry, so the question was, will you have to adjust your pricing models while selling to the public sector? The answer to that question is yes. In fact, I would think very early on when planning your strategy, just coming back to the point I think James referenced as well, of just understanding the different kind of commercial bands or sort of tiers within public sector procurement. Below 10K, very easy to sell quickly. 10 to 100K, it will take you about a month to 2 months to sell into the public sector or to go through a procurement process. And then above 100K, it will be a much slower 3 to 6 month process. I would very strongly advise you, until you get to a certain level of maturity, not to be pricing your product above 100 or 150K for individual contracts, because it will be much harder for you to sell into the public sector. For the private sector, that's still fine. If you're selling to pharmaceutical companies, to insurance companies, that will be part of the standard. For the public sector, you will have to do a hell of a lot more to justify a 200K price tag than a 100K price tag, if that makes sense. On the pandemic particular question, I don't think pricing, if anything, is really a part of selling at this particular moment in time. There are lots of people giving stuff away for free. The fact of the matter is, every commercial director and pretty much anyone in the health service, and indeed local councils at this point in time, will have full inboxes of tech offers of how they can help. It is very hard to break through that, and it will be very little to do with pricing, quite frankly. They will have a need of a solution that they will have in mind, and they will have a budget for that, and they'll be willing to pay if it fits their particular solution. The difficulty will be actually getting in front of them to be able to tell them what it is you can do. I have yet to find a really effective way of doing that, just because it's huge amounts of white noise. Go to the people who you're already, your networks and your contacts, get them to refer you. Look for formal sort of channels where they are, and try and use stuff like PR and social media as well. But if people aren't getting back to you, it's not because your product isn't great, it's just that probably their hair is on fire and their inbox is full. So don't take it personally.
Brilliant, thank you. We have another question from Carl Bridge, who says to the panel mainly, partnerships, we have seen huge growth opportunities, of which is both UK based as well as overseas. As a panel, how do you feel your businesses can cope with possible growth opportunity? Anyone want to jump in, or shall I pick one of you?
I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. It's like, how do we cope with the growth of our company?
How do you feel your business can cope with possible growth, with this possible growth opportunity? The opportunity that partnerships have seen a lot of opportunity both overseas and the UK. So
so we actually there at the moment we've got an opportunity to partner with a company in Switzerland, and it's just a matter of how you redistribute your team, or how you hire more people if it's possible, if you have more investors or more money to join in your business. And also, especially depending on what your focus is, there might be opportunity to expand internationally, but you want to focus your attention in one specific area, such as, for example, working in the NHS and hosting your product in big organizations such as the NHS. So it really depends, that's in my opinion. But for RhythmiaBreath, we are all about expanding, and we will do as much as we can to make this a global initiative.
Definitely. Joanna or James, do you have anything you'd like to add?
It's just another day being a startup, really, isn't it? Where you don't have quite enough resource to do what you're trying to do, and you're just like, all right, how are we going to make it through this one? I think, obviously lots of opportunities coming towards anyone in healthcare, and I think we're all just doing our best.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I mean, I think the terrifying truth about big being a businessman or entrepreneur, businesswoman, is that, you know, you have this problem in front of you, and it's like, you've got to solve this range of stuff, and you haven't got enough resources to do it, and you've got to be smart and do it by the skin of your teeth and get through the problems and somehow get it next to the level, and you fight, and then you get to the next level. If you don't, you die, so it's game over, but you get to the next level, let's assume, and then you claw yourself up and think, oh, we did that, and then you look at the vista that's opened up because you've now opened up a lot of opportunity, and suddenly there's a whole new range of problems and you haven't got enough resource for them. So even though you might have unlocked more resource, it's never enough. So, and I think that that's true, you know, right up to Jeff Bezos. You know, I think that the fact is, you know, Amazon didn't find themselves with enough resource to cope with COVID. They had to hire 100,000 people and cope with, like, you know, privacy complaints and logistic complaints and problems around the world, and, you know, flights being shut and all the rest of it. And I think it is a fact of life. You know, it's kind of a video game. You're always moving up to a new level, and the tools that you've brought with you from the level before are never quite enough. So actually, and funny enough, I think about, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Jeff Bezos, but I do think about that strategy he has of calling the kind of, you know, Amazon buildings day one. And he has this mantra which he says it's always day one at Amazon. And I try to think that way with Hospify. You know, I feel like it's always day one. You know, we're always at the beginning of something, and, you know, and you're always finding the smart way to cope with what's in front of you. And I think once you get into that rut where you feel you're coasting and it's all going fine, actually, at that point, the business has stopped evolving. And actually, that's the time to be really scared. Once it gets too comfortable, you know, you're probably not paying attention. So, you know, I think it's the reality of entrepreneurship, unfortunately.
We have 2 more questions, but obviously, Pamela, if you need to leave, I do appreciate we've run over time, so if you need to shoot, just shoot. But my last 2 questions on the screen. This one says, primarily for James, when developing healthcare solutions, how easy have you found it to interact with healthcare practitioners, e.g. nurses, doctors and management, to understand their needs, for example, by running focus groups or questionnaires or speaking to them one-to-one?
Very difficult, actually. I mean, it's weird. It's sort of divided slightly to camps. On one hand, it's sort of really easy in that because my co-founder's a doctor, so every day I speak to a healthcare professional about the problems that we face. But one, trying to formalize the relationship and get more formal interaction from clinical professionals is actually incredibly hard, mainly because they're very, very busy people who are overstretched and underpaid and coping with, you know, their own challenges around constantly trying to resource, you know, more than they have actually got the resources to do. And, you know, although most people that you talk to are enthusiastic about ideas and want to engage, the reality is that they often don't have time to do that, and it's very difficult to therefore carve out that time. And one of the biggest challenges that we've had throughout the history of Hospify, and that we still have today, actually is one of the things that has been derailed for us by COVID, is trying to square the circle that you have as a startup in dealing especially with the NHS, is that you have to justify the budget impact of your innovation, right? And because the NHS is a clinical culture and it tends to be oriented around buying new medical devices or kit or medicines, and that comes from a proof background, a scientific background of proof and efficacy, that's sort of carried over into purchasing digital health, even if it's not particularly appropriate a lot of the time. And so you find yourself, when you come up to procurement and you start talking to the procurement officers, you come up to these tick boxes that they have to achieve. They have to quantify the impact. Sorry, my phone is ringing. They have to quantify the impact of purchasing you on their bottom line. And this is an incredibly difficult thing to prove, because you do have to therefore have real life quantified impact studies that involve real life doctors and nurses in real life situations. And you just can't get hold of them or get the budget to do that, or get the partners who are willing to do that because they're too busy doing other stuff. And finding those kind of test beds and finding ways to do that is a real challenge, and it's one that we are constantly trying to solve. And we've tended to do more quality case studies rather than quant case studies in order to kind of bridge the gap. But we are very much trying to do more quant stuff, and we are constantly looking for ways to do it.
Definitely. And Sheree, this is the next one. Sheree, do you think that's obviously helped you because you work in the NHS and you've got kind of yourself firsthand to help along the way?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, I'm afraid. So that's one of the things that I said at the beginning as well, is that I made sure that I validated my idea first, you know, by approaching my colleague nurses and doctors that are already there. They know the problem and they know a possible solution. So when you offer them your solution, you need to hear all this, you know, stories and difficulties around your proposal. And that was really easy for me as a founder. So yeah, the answer is yes. It was slightly easier, but still faced, and I'm facing a lot of challenges, even though I'm in the system.
Yeah. Joanna, we had one specifically for you. As you initially developed a product that wasn't specifically aimed at the healthcare industry, did you then have to change and pivot the company to suit the industry?
Again, I think we got lucky with the first hospital we did a pilot with. They were Dutch, so they're just so great to work with. They're so just innovative as people. They were able to work with it as it was, as the consumer product was. They had one of the nurses was like sewing little bags to tie them onto the bed. They were just wonderful, and yeah, we were super lucky in that. Echoing what James said, gave us the opportunity of having that, gave us the real like validation and having real data and a real pilot to work with. In terms of changing the business, it's still sort of ongoing process, because I think the product as it stands, all the pilots we've done so far, they've mostly just worked with what we've got. But yeah, as the business moves forward and as we expand further and further into the health tech side of things, I think, yeah, we're going to have to modify the product.
Amazing. And finally, one last question before I let you all go. I think it's probably aimed more at Edward. It says the recent Innovate UK COVID disruption competition had 8,600 applicants in just 2 weeks. Is the size of the GovHealthTech innovation funding adequate for the opportunities, particularly in the light of COVID-19? If not, how much bigger should it be compared with other countries, and how can this be realised?
A big question, and from Gary, I believe. Hey, Gary, great to hear from you. So I'm not surprised that Innovate UK had that many applications in just 2 weeks. We ran a similar but smaller application process and got 1,600 in about 4 days. There's a huge amount of movement from companies that were traditionally positioning themselves as sort of private sector oriented to public sector focused now, just because many aspects of the private sector just don't have any money to spend on innovation or new technology at this point in time. So we've suddenly got a much more crowded marketplace than there used to be. Is the size of the health tech innovation funding adequate for the opportunities, particularly in the light of COVID-19? Even before COVID, there have been a lot of pushes within government to build better funding mechanisms, particularly for health tech, because it is one area where the UK is comparatively a lot stronger than many other players in Europe, but also the US. The US doesn't really have a health tech market. It has an insurance tech market, one could say, of which health tech is a part of. They have yet to get off the ground, and annoyingly, this crisis has hit kind of almost too early for a lot of the work that the likes of the British Business Bank and others were trying to push in terms of creating more funding for health tech startups. I mean, my personal view on this would be that outside of this crisis, if we're going to create a really thriving investor market in health tech, it will probably more likely come from the private sector and from VCs and angels and private equity, not from the government. Innovate UK is a great mechanism for some things, but getting companies from, start to full scale across the health tech industry is never going to be there. their full bag. And the only way we're going to get a thriving private sector investment market will be for the public sector to start buying technology more, particularly health sectors. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here of health sector bodies need to start buying health technology more to encourage investors to start investing in health tech companies more, to then create the scale to create more health tech companies. So it's an annoyingly circular argument, but what I would say is that I still believe, I'm going to stand like Boris Johnson here or some other politician, I still believe that London or anywhere else in the UK is still the best place in the world, definitely the best place in Europe to start a health tech company. The market is much larger, the funding is much more readily available than it is in Germany, France, anywhere in Scandinavia. So this is a strange moment of crisis, and I can understand why it might be hard to get investment, but in the grander scheme of things, I still think that, you know, there's a long way to go for the health tech investment market to grow, but you're still in the right place, if that makes sense.
Definitely, that's good to hear. Well, thank you, panel. I mean, I could sit here all day and ask you a million questions and keep you. I think it's been really interesting, really insightful. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for being a part of it. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And again, thank you to Gabby for your mindfulness session. Really set us up. Thank you everyone for joined in and listened. Look out for the post-event mailer tomorrow, where you can read more about these lovely people. And obviously we can put you in touch with them if you're not already and you want to be. Thank you for my team for all their help. And if you haven't already, check out our podcast, because there are some amazing people on there. And we'll be releasing series 2 tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you all soon for the next one.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you all. Take care. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.